Thank you very much for joining us here on Business at 9. I'm Nivedna Prabhu. Let's put our top focus on how US President Donald Trump has once again used his economic weapon of choice tariffs, this time targeting a diverse group of nations: Brazil, Canada, India, and even Russia. Now, in a series of fiery posts on Truth Social, Trump announced a 25% tariff on Indian goods starting August 1st, along with an unspecified, remember, penalty for India's purchase of Russian oil and military equipment. Brazil faces a staggering 50% tariff, justified by Trump as a response to the prosecution of his ally, former President Bolsonaro. Canada is staring down a 35% levy, partly over its stance on Palestine statehood, while Trump has, of course, threatened Russia's trade partners with 100% tariffs unless Moscow ends its war in Ukraine. But is the self-proclaimed tariff king strengthening, America's hand, or is he embarrassing himself on the global stage? Because India, with a $45.8 billion trade surplus with the US last year, is no small player. Trump's move, citing India's high tariffs and Russian ties, ignores New Delhi's strategic balancing act in a volatile world. But let's tell you, India's Commerce Ministry has responded coolly, emphasizing its commitment to a fair and balanced trade deal while prioritizing national interests, especially, remember, the welfare of our farmers and small businesses. Now, critics argue Trump's tariff blitz is less about strategy and more about posturing. His erratic demands, ranging from trade concessions to geopolitical ultimatums, have left allies and adversaries alike scrambling. Brazil's President Lula has defiantly rejected Trump's pressure, while Canada's Trudeau is navigating a delicate diplomatic dance. But that would be Carney. Even Russia, with minimal direct trade with the US, seems unfazed, with the Moscow Stock Exchange shrugging off Trump's threat. So, is Trump's tariff tantrum a masterstroke or a misstep? Is he the deal maker he claims to be, or is the tariff king risking global economic chaos and his own credibility? As the August 1st clearly deadline looms, India stands firm, ready to protect its interest. We'll talk all of on that and how our guests are also viewing it. But before we dive into that, let's listen in to what Piyush Goyal did say in both the houses this month.
Government attaches the utmost importance to protecting and promoting the welfare of our farmers, workers, entrepreneurs, exporters, MSMEs, and all sections of industry. We will take all necessary steps to secure and advance our national interest.
All right. National interest is how we're looking at it as far as that statement coming through. But let me take the opportunity to go across to my guests joining us this evening as far as how they are looking at this as well. Gurcharan Das, author and commentator, former CEO P&G India, joining us this evening, as well as R. Jagannathan, senior journalist. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here this evening on ET. Now, Mr. Das, let me begin with you. You know, Trump threatens Brazil, Canada, India and Russia in one sweep. But from a strategic lens, is this real trade diplomacy or a president embarrassing himself on the global stage, with the kind of reactions and statements also made?
Well, I think let's first understand what is our national interest before we talk about whether Trump is posturing or what. I agree with obviously we have to protect our national interest, but I'm not sure we are all together on what our national interest is. Now, for the last 30 years, since 91, India has grown at 6.5% average during this period. Now, this is excellent for a democracy. Poverty has come down to almost less than 5%, according to the latest World Bank numbers. Middle class has grown to 30%. But we have failed, even though today we are the fastest growing major economy in the world, we have failed to create an industrial revolution, which means we have failed to create the jobs that should have been created with this high growth rate. And why? Well, the fact of the matter is that manufacturing has let us down. We have jumped from a green revolution to an IT revolution. Manufacturing only employs 11% of people, has less than 15% of GDP, and represents only 2% of world exports. 45% of Indian workers are on the farm. That is double of what the farm needs, what agriculture needs. And the only hope for these people, they can't hope to go into the IT phase. The real hope is to go through the factory stage, as every successful country did. And what the Asian tigers have taught us, the countries that have become middle class in Asia now, is that they did it through the export of labor-intensive manufacturers. And primarily, big market was the United States. And that is still true. So this is where tariffs come in. That
those pertinent points, let me interject you there. How will it change if India opens to US imports? In a scenario, how are you looking at that?
I'm coming to that. What I'm trying to say is, don't try to look at the past. That's what you're doing. Look to the future. The future means to create jobs. And the problem is that we are stuck in a low productivity agriculture. And what with that we need a second green revolution. But what we want at this stage, crucially, is to create jobs in manufacturing. And so, therefore, our tariffs they have to come down. And therefore, Mr. Trump is doing us a favor in forcing India to come down to the level of our competitors. And this is where now Mr. Trump, the deal maker, comes in. That
be okay by opening up markets for US soybean?
Sorry?
While India still wants to, continue to protect its red lines by opening up markets for US soybean?
Yes, but there are opportunities there for give and take still in this deal. And this is why Mr. Trump's thing, this is part of his deal making. And we should relook at our red lines. There are, even in agriculture, there are areas like soya that we should give into, corn. We don't need. There are ways to go into much more. We need to go into much more productive. And you should listen to Ashok Gulati, the agricultural economist, the best one. And really, we are stuck in the past. We have failed in manufacturing. We can still succeed. I mean, Apple has shown the way of how we can do it. But for Apple, for us to take over, we have already in the last quarter sold more iPhones to the United States than China. And with just this level of manufacturing.
Right, Mr. Das, as you make those pertinent points, I'm going to come back to you. All right. You did say towards the end that India also has to relook at red lines. Mr. Jagannathan, appreciate you also joining us this evening and also being patient. Given the aspect of what we heard Mr. Das put into context and the way that he's essentially viewing it and how, of course, you will counter it and look at it. But at the same time, touching upon what Piyush Goyal also said, it's a direct counter to Trump. Given the fact that does it mark a shift in India's trade posture from cautious to confrontational? Given the fact that for so long we hadn't seen a reaction as yet?
No, I don't think we have been confrontational at all as far as the US is concerned. If you remember, as soon as Mr. Trump was inaugurated, the Prime Minister was the first one to go and meet him, and the trade talks to have a lower tariff regime had begun right there. So I mean, I agree with Guru Prasad that we must look at our red lines, but we had already started looking at them. And in fact, I am told that nearly 90% of the products that were currently in high tariffs were supposed to be lowered either immediately or in stages. It was only in agriculture that we drew the red line, because that is a area where there are so many people employed that you can't immediately open it and throw some millions of people on the streets. So you have to do it slowly. So I think, but Trump wants his GM foods and, mutton-fed, milk products and all to come to India, which we have what we call a non-tariff barriers. No, we don't, because in this country, anything related to cows and beef and all have a religious significance. And so there are restrictions there. But my point is, we were actually reviewing our red lines and we were close to an agreement. Mr. Trump's frustration is that he thought we will agree to everything he said. And we said, no, there are certain things we still can't do at this stage. And if you actually see, we have changed our red lines. Look at the FTA with the EFTA countries, the FTA with UAE, the FTA with Australia, the FTA with UK, which we just signed a few weeks ago. So we have changed our rules. I mean, it's not like we would have changed them for the US. So we are changing. And not only that, US is actually doing something counterproductive because we have just started getting into the manufacturing cycle. As Mr. Das said, Apple was just bringing in a manufacturing and assembling culture in electronics. And if Trump says, no, you must produce the same electronics in the US at much higher cost, he is the one who is actually drawing the wrong red lines. So I think we need to, however, when dealing with Trump, we saw 90% of what he says and tweets about are nonsense and unnecessarily provocative and aggressive. We need to take it calmly, talk behind the scenes and get the deal done. I think if we just don't talk back too much, but just work behind the scenes, because
Mr. Jagannathan, sorry for interjecting you over there, but given the aspect of how Trump also would view India as a friend, but that's not the kind of language. I mean, given what we also saw in terms of the social media posts, what do you make of that?
Yeah, so look at it this way. There is not a friend or ally he has not offended. Okay, from Canada to Mexico to EU to Japan or even my tiny Greenland, he has said obnoxious things. And so he seems to be getting away. He thinks that putting people on the defensive and getting them riled up is the way to get them to concede. And I think all the deals he has done, I can guarantee you they're all going to unravel over the next 2 years. You think the EU is going to buy $750 billion worth of American oil and invest another $600 billion when they can't get enough people to invest even in the EU? So I think it's not going to work. And he just needs the deal signed so that he can say before the next election that is due in another 15 months, the midterm elections, that look, I've done all this thing and my thing is working. But by that time, nothing is actually going to work. So he is actually, I think he's frustrated with India because we have prolonged the discussions and we have sort of not given in on everything that he wanted us so that he can claim this is a first thing. And more or less, he's pivoting towards Pakistan. And suddenly, remember, he was the guy who wanted to make up with Russia. Now, suddenly he has a problem with people having a deal with Russia. So I think he is very changeable, contrary-minded cuss, and we should just deal with it without natural, unnecessary aggression. Do the deal behind the seal and give him a win. That's it.
But while you point that out, Mr. Jagannathan, quickly coming back to you, can Goyal's stand be turned into leverage, perhaps by aligning with other, targeted nations? Because he seems to be crossing the line by attempting to influence local politics, for example, like Brazil.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he said everything that need not and should not never have been said. What Mr. Goyal has said is for our audience, saying that we are not going to sacrifice national interest. And Mr. Trump, if he thinks logically, should have no problem with that, because he says he is defending his national interest. So obviously you have to find a via media and a thing like that. But I think for us, it does not make sense to adopt a belligerent language at this stage, unless Trump actually makes things bad for us in the coming 2 months. We have to accept the fact the next 1 or 2 months our exports will suffer.
In that worst case scenario. Mr. Jagannathan, I'm going to come back to you. I do see that Mr. Das also wants to chime in and make his point. Mr. Das, thank you also for being extremely patient. How do you view with essentially what we've been looking at the moment in terms of, is that how you look at it as well?
I think we have to, I agree with Jagannath that a lot of this is his style. And let's not get sidelined by style. Let's stay with substance. If he wants his ego massaged, there's nothing wrong with that. Smart people who are deal makers on the other side will massage his ego. Pakistan massaged his ego, so fine. And how long is this going to last? America is the country which is going to get hurt most by these high tariffs in the end. So I would say, let's be smart. Let's not try and shout about our national interest and yay and woe. Let's just quietly make the deal and try and make a deal that would be competitive to our competitors with whom we are competing in the world economy, and not get riled up by his style. Just ignore all that. It's a child waiting for attention. It's the smart thing is just get on with it, get the deal done. That's where I feel that we started early, but we just did not have the flexibility in our minds. Even agriculture, we can give a timetable for our agriculture, certain areas where we are stuck with the MSP type of grains and all that. The real issue is to get Punjab and Haryana farmers to move into other crops, diversify our crops. And so, anyway, my point is that he's a deal maker. Let's treat him like a deal maker and not get riled up about his style and all that. Stay with it, do it quietly.
All right, treat him like a deal maker. But going back, Mr. Das, to the point that you said, why shouldn't somebody massage his ego like the Munirs of the world? But Mr. Jagannathan, would you agree with that or differ? Because why should India do that?
We don't have to see. Pakistan is a long-time loser, so it can afford to do all this muska marrowing and massaging the ego. But we can behave with dignity and get him to do what is both in his interest and in our interest. What we don't need to do is take a very belligerent line, which needlessly will create problems and will go against our own interest in the things. We have no reason to fight with the world's first superpower when we have every reason to do more trade with him. So after all, what is the other alternative? Are we going to trade even more with China and create an even bigger fiscal current account deficit for ourselves? No, we need to balance the trade, and the US is very important, but we should also, of course, speed up FTAs with the European Union and other such trade blocs, maybe better deal with Canada, whatever it is. So Trump also gets a message that, look, his is not the only game in town, but we have a lot of commonalities and interests in the US, especially in the services area where we have an even bigger surplus compared to trade, merchandise trade. So we need to protect that, and we don't have to get into a slanging match where he starts saying that, okay, now I am going to block your services exports. So that's not what we need.
Absolutely. But Mr. Das, coming back to you, given the way that we're also looking at these statements having come through today, and you have seen trade wars up close as well, but Trump's tariff-free economic strategy or political theater aimed at his domestic base at the end of the day?
Well,
while you
both.
say, treat him like a deal maker.
Yeah, I mean, it's both. Every nation appeals to their domestic, and he has this crazy MAGA lot over there that. But when US starts hurting from all this, it's all this is going to change. Right now, we should just quickly make a deal that ensures that we are competitive to Vietnam and countries that which we have to compete with. And we should push very hard for the global brands to come and produce in India. Indian manufacturers have not produced one global brand. And so they're not going to be the ones creating jobs. We need to create jobs so that our economy then moves to a point where by 2047, the Viksit Bharat goal, in today's middle class, which is about 30%, becomes about 60%. Then we can truly call ourselves, respect around $10,000 per capita income. That should be. So our political policy, our military policy, our foreign policy, they should all be 7%, 7.5% economic growth. That should be our first mantra, and see everything through the eyes of that. And if it helps us to, and that's why I agreed with Jagan. Why take a phanda with Trump? Why must we if he wants to take credit for our war with Pakistan, let him take credit for that. That's not important. Pakistan is a failed state. And
that would open up an entirely different conversation altogether. I'll have to interject you for the moment because I'm afraid we're running short of time.
Yeah,
but yes, fair enough. We've got your points. Right. In a nutshell, Mr. Das. Right. All right. On that note, I want to thank you as well as Mr. Jagannathan for taking the time out, joining us here, sharing with us how you're looking at this. Essentially, of course, we'll know how this pans out only in a couple of weeks from now. Having said that, we leave the conversation at that for the moment because we continue to track more important developments that we have here for our viewers on Business at 9. More about how the top court, in fact, is reviewing the judgment that quashed JSW Steel's resolution plan for Bhushan Power and Steel. SG Tushar Mehta argues that the court cannot interfere with the COC's commercial decisions. A fresh hearing is in fact set for Thursday, that is August 7th. Samir Dikshit reported this earlier today. Let's listen in.
In a major relief to JSW Steel, Supreme Court made a very important observation and has recalled its earlier order passed on May 2nd, which set aside the resolution plan of JSW Steel and paved the way for the liquidation of Bhushan Power and Steel Limited, the BPSL company. And this order also mentioned one important aspect, that the earlier order which was passed is required a review because the earlier order, it was contrary to the law which was laid down in various precedent. So that was the important observation. In addition to this, the bench, which was led by the Chief Justice of India, B.R. Gavai, it also made a prima facie observation that we are of the view that the impunged judgment does not correctly consider the legal position as has been laid down by a catena of judgment. So based on these, the arguments presented by the various lawyers, for example, from the Committee of Creditors side, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta was presenting the arguments. So after going in detail the various arguments, now the Supreme Court has recalled its earlier order passed on 2nd of May. So JSW, basically they presented a resolution plan of 19,700 crore, and this resolution plan was set aside by the Supreme Court. When the arguments were being made in the Supreme Court, Solicitor General Mehta also mentioned that this order is actually raising many doubts in the entire proceedings and the process which was followed. Moreover, the resolution plan or the investment that company is making to the tune of somewhere around 20,000 crore, and even the employees, the 25,000 workers which are there in BPSL, so that need to be taken into account before passing this judgment. So after going into these sort of arguments, now the Supreme Court understands and has passed this prima facie observation that the entire case needs to go through a fresh review, and the matter has now been listed for the next week. The next date of hearing is 7th of August, when the entire case will be freshly reviewed in the Supreme Court.
All right, Samir, of course, keeping us ahead with that important development. But for the moment, that's all I have for you in this edition of Business at 9. Thank you very much for watching. And on behalf of my team and I,